Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Giddy Things. I'm Patty, and I am so excited to share that we have 54 lovely community members. Thank you so much, each of you who has clicked that subscribe button. If you're thinking about doing it now, please take a moment to click subscribe and hit notifications if you would like to know when another video is coming out. As promised, today's video is about time planning, and I'm going to get right into that. I am using Stephen Covey's 1989 concepts in this video because I have been using Stephen Covey's ideas for a good maybe 30 years. And 1989 was when he published 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And it's such a good book for anyone at any point in life. A lot of people were considering it from a business point of view. I considered it for myself from a student point of view, from a teacher point of view, wife, mother, friend, daughter, however, church member, however that needed to be on my priority list, whatever those tasks were, that's how I used it. And I love Covey's work in general. And one of his core ideas was putting first things first. And y'all know I don't have my glasses on, so I can't really see where I'm looking. It gets a little strange sometimes. Putting first things first. And in that same idea is not prioritizing your schedule, but scheduling your priorities. And so what we have to do to use Covey's system is to come up with a list of priorities and schedule those priorities out. So we're time planning again. We can't really manage time. Time is bigger than all of us, but we can plan our time. Sometimes those plans don't go as they should. That's just human life, right? That's what a late great friend of mine used to call life 101. And that just happens, right? But we can be more prepared than we might currently be. And one of the things we can do is attend to Covey's 4 quadrants of time planning. Quadrant one. Quadrant one is 4 things in your schedule that are both urgent and important. I'm going to give you a simple example that I'm going to try to bring through the entire video. So the simple example is if you're on the way to a job interview, so we're not dealing with anything that's, scary. We're on the, well, that's a little scary, but not, I'll keep going. So we're going to a job interview, and on the way, we're having a beverage. Our mouth is getting dry because we might be a little nervous, and we spill the beverage on our shirt. Well, at that moment, on your way to a job interview, where you're trying to be the best version of yourself, right? You 2.0, that's a moment that is both important and urgent. So this is the time that you have to pull over or have to ask the person who's driving you to pull over and change the shirt. Now, we'll deal with at the end of this quadrant system how the extra shirt gets in the car to begin with, right? Because who carries an extra shirt around? Well, some people do. I do. But it's not natural to me. It doesn't come natural to me. That's why I needed Stephen Covey's ideas from 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, in particular, this quadrant system for time planning. That's why I needed that, is because it really doesn't come naturally to me. I'm a person who can be a little time blind, which is just a term that means I can let a lot of time go by and it doesn't seem like a lot of time to me. So that's why I needed the help. So quadrant one, again, is for that extra shirt. It's for things that are urgent and important. So they need to be done now, and they are crucial to meeting a goal. Whether that's a deadline at work, whether that's something that a child, a spouse, a parent, a friend needs, these things are things that get top billing in your priority. Now, here's the thing. The second quadrant's going to help us a lot, but I'm not going to really tell you as much about it while I'm explaining it as I will after we're done with all 4 quadrants. So the second quadrant is things that are important but not urgent. It's like relationship building, like strategizing, coming up with a strategic plan for how things are going to get done, thinking ahead to solve issues before they occur if you know that they are likely to occur in your daily life. So this is all about tactical strategy for coming up with ways to zero in on thinking about your future self. My best friend always says your future self will thank you. And this is one of those cases. Quadrant two is the suitcase that the extra shirts and all the other stuff come along in. So that's quadrant 2. Again, I'm a little bit allergied up, so I'm getting a little nasally. So again, quadrant 2 is, it's important, but it's not urgent. It's not something that has to be taken care of this moment. So it's a good space to be in when you think about it that way. Then quadrant 3, it's things that are urgent, but not important. These usually fall under it should be delegated kinds of things. They fall under things that usually most people could do. I'm going to grab a tissue. Most people could do for you even. But you kind of just take care of them yourself, because sometimes it seems in the moment easier to do things yourself than to ask someone else to help you. But they're things you could get help with, right? That's the delegation station is quadrant 3. And then quadrant 4 are things that, you guessed it, are not important and not urgent. Now, it doesn't mean that they don't have a place. I don't want to say all of this is just like you're procrastinating, you're wasting your time. Of course not. There are some things that other people consider trivial that are super important to us and to our work-life balance, our stability, our emotional wellness. So I'm not going to call all of these things time wasters, even though that's what most people call them in Covey's system, is time wasters. They can turn into time wasters very quickly is the key. So let's go back to quadrant 1, the extra shirt quadrant. Right? So quadrant 1 are it's those things again that you have to get done. When someone says, oh, just, attend to this and that will take care of it. And it's not, right? Because it is an urgency and emergency in your life. And it may be one that other people don't understand. That often is the case. For example, I have children on the autism spectrum. Especially when they were younger, if my kids were having a moment that was brought about by some external stressor for them, it might not make sense to somebody else why it is both urgent and important for my son to have a specific blanket. Now, they're grown now, but this is when they were littler. To have a specific blanket, to have a specific kind of lunch, if he has texture issues to have. But in my life, that is urgent and important. So if something's going awry there, I need to have a plan set in place in quadrant, I'm sorry, on my nose, it's itchy, in quadrant 2, which is where I have planned for quadrant 1. So quadrant 2, again, things that are important but not urgent. This is where we can set up a plan here in quadrant 2 that will help us plan for quadrant 1. So, for example, if I have a routine for setting up everybody's lunches or everybody's clothes for the next day or whatever else, it helps me not to have as much quadrant 1 stuff come up. I can say it. And so this is where I may be in the now, because urgent is always about the now. But over here in the not urgent, but important, is a place where in time that I plan ahead of time to set up a strategy for when things become urgent. I'm feeding quadrant 2 into quadrant 1 to keep everything on a more even keel. I hope that makes sense. But again, this quadrant 1 is urgent and important. So I need to take quadrant 2, where I've got room for things that are important, but they're not urgent. It's not right now, to lend some of the stability of quadrant 2 to quadrant 1. I hope that makes sense. You feel free to discuss in the comments. Then in quadrant 3, we're dealing with things that we can really do something about, to be honest, that we can really do something about. So quadrant 3, the not important but seem urgent stuff, again, is usually stuff you can delegate. But again, here we are in 2. Quadrant 2 is really the solid rock on which all the other quadrants stand, because if I have a good, say, relationship building, which I mentioned in quadrant 2, if I have good relationships in my life, I have things set up where I can delegate stuff down here in quadrant 3 from quadrant 2. Right now, quadrant 1 is its own beast, right? That stuff that's urgent and is important in quadrant 2 can help there too. But down here in quadrant 3, Say I have an overload of email. Is it something I have to answer for myself, first of all? Are there emails that could be handled by other people? Are there other people I could get those emails rerouted to so they never came through my inbox in the first place? Are there things that my partner can take care of for me that I didn't think of before because I've just kept them on my list for so long that I feel like I'm the only person to whom they can belong? And that's not really accurate in my life. Is it stuff that comes up over and over again where there are people who are in my life who are having a hard time planning their own time? And so their emergency becomes my urgency, and it's not always an emergency, right? So that's the key, is this delegation down here. Again, you can plan for up here, whether it's building relationships, having strategic plans in place for what will we do if this happens and it seems urgent, um, to us at the time, but it's just something that someone else could be taking care of, right? So we've got the extra shirt is needed, the extra shirt has been planned for, and this is who's going to bring me an extra shirt if I need a third one. That's quadrant 3. If I spill something twice, just stop drinking stuff, is what some people would tell me. But while you're about to go to a job interview, but y'all, my mouth is dry, I'm nervous. So in quadrant 3, it's who's going to bring me that third shirt? What kinds of things have I put in place in quadrant 2 that are going to take other people's urgencies out of my way? Right? Whether this is someone who consistently has a struggle with something, and every single time that struggle emerges, whether it's a child, a parent, a friend, a colleague, that thing comes over onto my list. I need to have a solid tutorial conversation with that person and help them get past that thing that keeps creeping over onto my list and ends up in my quadrant 3, where I do not want it, where it's urgent, but it's not important, right? Those are the things that can really get you, are those things you haven't learned to delegate to other people. If people are at home and they're hungry, there should be someone there who has the tools and the basic know-how to get something that's been planned in quadrant 2 out of the fridge and into wherever it needs to be prepared. And maybe it doesn't even need to be prepared. Maybe it's something you've put in the fridge that can come straight from the fridge and be eaten. Because yes, there is a sense of urgency when people are hungry. And I'm not saying it's not important that people eat, but it's come across your desk, metaphorically speaking. Even if you don't have a desk, it's gotten on your list somehow, and it could be on someone else's list. So that's the key to quadrant 3. They're things that could be on someone else's list, and they tend to creep up more often than not. Finally, quadrant 4 is pretty easy to deal with. Talking about it, but it's not easy to deal with in practicality. Quadrant 4 are those things that are not urgent and not important. This is doom scrolling, as they call it, on Instagram or Facebook or any kind of social media platform. Getting caught up in that and spending too much time doing it, too much time playing like online games, too much time watching TV, too much time in general spent on something that's not adding any value to your life. Sometimes it can be shopping, which is dragging you down in more than one way, probably, maybe financially, and in the sense of wasting time. Anything that typically we're doing to avoid doing other things that we don't want to do, things in quadrants 1, 2, and 3. So when we want to forget about that, and it's so easy if things get on top of you, this is not a judgment. I have done it. I have been there. And that's why I know that having the quadrants set up this way is crucial, because otherwise, where's the extra shirt coming from? I don't do this 100% of the time terribly well, but I do it probably about 90% of the time well enough to make things, if they're planned out, to make things a lot more calm in my life, to create less stress for myself, to take care of my needs. Like, I recently came from having a nice shower and doing all my skincare and taking care of myself. There have been times in my life when it's been a stretch to do that. But by consistently staying in quadrant 2 for years, it takes time, ironically, I have been able to manage that extra shirt stuff a little bit better than I did, say, 5 or 10 years ago. I want to look at my list to make sure I've told y'all everything. And of course, my list is on the back of a receipt because I tend to just grab a piece of paper that's near me. So, oh yeah, so that I already said that. So, it is important to find, yes, I'm glad I looked at this list, to find your current focus areas as well. So the focus areas are kind of a little bonus. It's a little extra in this quadrant system. Take a moment when you're in quadrant 2 time and think about the areas of your life that are currently your biggest focus. For some seasons of life, that might be family. For some seasons of life, that might be work. Sometimes you constantly have, I always tell my students, it's my faith, my family, and my students are the top 3 priorities. And so I always tell them, no pressure, right? You're just in my top 3 priorities. But the key is if I have that as a focus and it's consistent, and of course, I have this channel, which is really, really important to me. And we'll call this family. Why don't we call this family? I like that. But having those things that are important, I need to make sure that they're hanging out in quadrant 2 where I'm making plans for how I'm going to do this. I had a plan for getting time to make the YouTube videos I wanted to make today. And I came in about 15 minutes late. But that's better than not at all, right? And that's what I mean by doing this imperfectly sometimes. But have your focus areas, your priorities set up. If there are people, things, and activities that always need to be a focus for you, plan for them in quadrant 2 so they don't become emergent in an emergency and an urgency in quadrant 1. So just to go back over those really quickly, I can't believe I only missed one thing on my list. It's amazing. Yay! Quadrant 1, things that are urgent and emergent, things that are an urgency and an importance. In quadrant 2, we have things that are important but not urgent. Oh, what a nice thing. You can take a big sigh, a deep breath, and do those things and get ready for the other areas of life. Quadrant 3, these are things that seem urgent, but they're not important. A lot of times they come off of other people's priority list. Sometimes that's your boss. Maybe you can't do anything about that, but you will have planned in quadrant 2 to feed into quadrant 1 and quadrant 3. Then in quadrant 4, we have things that we can manage pretty easily if we're objective about it with ourselves and honest. Things that we need to plan for, but we don't maybe need to plan as much time for them as we are planning. And that's why we seem to run out of time, is because there's too much time spent in quadrant 4, which is not important and not urgent, right? It's things that when we have a minute, we can relax into them. But when your time is really strapped, believe it or not, paying attention to all 4 of these quadrants will do a world of good. I'm going to link the book in the description, the 1989 publication date. It's been republished many times, but it's Stephen Covey's Habits of Highly Effective People. I encourage you, if you'd like to read that, either borrow it from the library, get the Libby app and borrow it from the library for free, pick it up at a thrift store for a quarter or 50 cents or $1. Obviously, it's available via Amazon, but you can also get it on things like thriftbooks.com. And there's all kinds of price points associated with that, or your favorite bookseller or book vendor. I hope this has been helpful to you. Thank you for putting up with my tissue using. You're so special to me. You're so important to me. I will link as many resources for you below as I can think of that will be helpful and not overwhelming, because we can waste time even with printing stuff out and organizing things that are supposed to help us save time. So a good number of really important and helpful things for the 4 quadrants. And I hope the description that has been kind of laid back and friendly is helpful to you. Let me know if you have any questions or comments. We can talk about this some more. But in the meantime, I hope you always know how loved you are and that you'll go in peace and love to serve others.